It's time for truth, a ministry of Truth Family Bible Church in Middleton, Idaho. It's time for truth exists to glorify God through the edification of his saints in our local church and for the benefit of the church around the world. I'm your host, Pastor Danny Steinmeyer. Well, hello, everyone. Once again, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here. Glad that you have made us part of your day. And it is late spring here in southwest Idaho, and it is beautiful. Weather's been great. The sun has been shining. The fields are green. I saw some tractors. My father-in-law was planting his field today. I saw several tractors out there planting today. The
allergies are strong.
Yeah, for those people suffering with those allergies, thankfully I don't deal with that, too much of that. But yeah, all the good stuff is happening of spring, and so we're really it's been a great time of year. The sports, baseball is winding down. We got state tournament coming up in the next couple of days at the time of this recording, and so looking forward to seeing some good things happen in
your
sports.
City playing my city, probably. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, hopefully continuing
I have
our
very
dominance
little.
over
I
your
have
city.
very little hope of Melba beating you. It's okay.
Yeah, but we'll see. We'll see where it goes. That's one of the things that's been evident to me is every team can be beaten in this particular league. So
yep,
that's
Nampa Christian
which is
can fall.
Part of the way. Part of the reason why we like sports is because there's always that parity and those interesting.
I have a guy
dynamics.
in my church that says baseball is the most Calvinistic sport because of just the amazing variety of outcomes that could happen from the same exact action every inning. And it's like, well, that's probably true of all sports, but I see where he's coming from.
Okay. Well, today, on that note, we transitioned to our topic for today. We had an episode previously that was a little bit on the longer side, dealing with the odious, the ordering of our hatreds properly, and making sure that we are properly ordering, properly prioritizing those things that we actually do have charge over and responsibility for, and making sure that we understand rightly as we think about what are those real, genuine threats and those dangers that we need to address firmly, both from within and without, and close to us, and then further out. They all are valuable for us to be thoughtful about and to have values in that come from God's Word. And we need to be wise and prioritize these things properly, and making sure that we're not just simply keyboard warriors or just wagging our heads like tisk tisk, all these things that are happening out there. But we also ought to be involved in taking advantage of the chance to make a difference in those spheres in which we have the most influence. And so we talked about that. But then one of the things that we had talked about previously, we really didn't get a chance to fit it in here, was not just that we fight these dangers or these evils, but also how we fight. So we thought that we would just do another brief episode to talk about those things and to address some of those issues, because I think both of us have seen some of the problems and some of the dangers of guys recognizing the value and the need to fight, but the importance of making sure that we fight as virtuous warriors. Right? We need to make sure that we are. That we're not guilty, or that we're not, as 1 Peter 4 talks about, that we're not suffering the opposition and the reviling of those who oppose us justly, that they actually have right accusations of sin and of character flaws and so forth in the way in which we fight. So let's make sure that we have sharp arrows, that we are clear in our rules of engagement, and to make sure that we are Christ-like in these different things, right? Because Christ did flip over tables. He did use choice words at various times. You brood of vipers and you whitewash tombs, but
calling people dogs was pretty harsh back then.
So there are appropriate things, and there's inappropriate ways to do things as well. So we want to make sure that we're doing things right.
Yeah, we fight as Christ's men. Right, so we have to recognize that. I mean, I love a good Crusader meme as much as the next guy, and there's something to regaining that fight. I think it's been actually a gift to the church because I think, as we talked about last episode, one of the greatest threats to the church is just the emasculation of men. We framed it with talking about feminism, but if you think about it, it's the emasculating effect that it's had on men in our society. From the top down, we have women ruling over us in general. That's an abdication by men to not rise up to those places of authority. We've got women in the military fighting, strapping on the armaments of war to go fight battles for us that might not even be just, right? So, I mean, if you think about just the framework of our society, men have abdicated roles of authority. They've been primarily emasculated and they've been set to the side. And so the regaining of a warrior spirit in the church and a masculine drive to lead, to fight, is a gift. It's good.
Yes.
But like all good gifts, we need to learn how to appreciate them well and use them well. I had a conversation recently with a brother where I talked about, we were talking about, how truth is sort of a sword. Like it's a sharp weapon and it's a sharp instrument. The Bible is described as a two-edged sword. And so when you're learning to use a martial instrument, an instrument for war, you have to learn how to wield it well. Otherwise, you're going to damage yourself and damage those around you. And so regaining that truth of biblical masculinity is a gift to the church, but it's one that we need to mature in. And we recognize that we have a lot of young men in our church. We're still relatively young men by general standards. We're not. We may have gray hair, but we're not aged, wizened old men in our church yet. And we recognize that we have an obligation to equip our young men to fight well and to fight righteously and with valor. I think regaining valor. As we rebuild that masculine spirit, we also need to be built upon the same chivalry and valor that those same crusaders, if you will, live their life and foundation upon.
And so as men are red pilling, as some people will say, or waking up to some of the realities, their eyes are opening to the lies that we've been told. They are recognizing a lot of the problems that the previous generation has either left undone and didn't deal with, or has created in terms of problems themselves. Recognizing a lot of the failures of our fathers and grandfathers, the boomer generation at times. There's no doubt that there has been a dereliction of duty there and that generationally. And so there's young men especially that are waking up to some of these realities. They are seeing the problems of some of the Zionism and some of the legacy that we have now inherited and the problems that it has meant for our country. And they're recognizing that, man, we're in over our heads in a lot of different ways, both in society, the nation, but also in the church and in the family.
Yes, sir.
And so it is good that men are waking up to these things. The challenge is that you can end up being one who fights without aim. You do so in an undisciplined manner, and that is one of the, going back to some of the things we talked about, the importance of leadership, wherein we do need to make sure that there are leaders who are, and this is part of the problem, is that there's a number of leaders that aren't, I think, fighting well, but we do need to have leaders who provide some of the guardrails, some of the instruction,
rules of engagement.
the instruction for how to do so in a way that is virtuous, right? That and I think some of the things that we're kind of seeing and concerning for us.
Oh, you said
excuse me. I know I said concerning. But, I don't want to be a concerned bro.
And they turned it off now.
But it is the element of the fight ends up just being a street fight with the lowest common denominator. It's like we want to be the sailors, the
grunts,
the grunt soldiers. That's right where I was going with that. Wherein it's the lowest class, if you will, of the fight. It's the street fight wherein we're eye gouging and we're fish hooking and we're doing all these things that are actually not fighting in a way that is gentlemanly. Like there is something too.
Maybe occasionally necessary, but it shouldn't be the de facto position, especially for a Christian man.
Right. And so there is this element of what I would refer to as a pursuit of fleshly means of engagement.
Yeah.
So when I say that, what do you hear? What are the things that you have not concern about, but that give you pause, give you provide a cautionary moment
Sure.
in your thinking.
Well, I guess a good way just to frame this conversation to put it in perspective is we're recognizing that some people don't realize we're at war, right? So as we talk about this, I just want to encourage you, particularly men, and I'll say young men, but men in general. This
Yeah.
is I know plenty of guys that are older than me that are in the same position, right? And I count myself there as a 40-year-old man. I recognize there are things that I was not thinking about 10 years ago that I wish I was, right? There is a fight on our hands. We recognize it's wartime. This is not, we don't have the privilege of sitting in, 1910 America where the predominant, worldview of the nation is Christianity, where we're pre-World War I, pre-World War II, post-war consensus, if you will. All those things. Like we very different society 100 years ago, right? We don't have the liberty of sitting and knowing that there are certain things that we can just take for granted. We know that women are going to know what women are. We know that children are going to generally be obedient. We know that the school system is not going to necessarily indoctrinate people to think that they can be any gender they want, right? Like we recognize we don't live in that time anymore. Neither do you, friend. We recognize that we're at war, and so this is not peacetime. This is more like we're in the book of Judges right now. We're not necessarily in the book of, I don't know. There's not really a lot of good examples of peacetime in the Bible, frankly, but we recognize that. So as a foundation, we want to start from the fact that we know that there is a time to fight. There's a time to kill. There's a time even for brutal tactics that may still be God honoring. But even in the most brutal, all out fights where you are trying to pursue the destruction of the enemy, even in the midst of that, if you take the examples of the Old Testament, Israel still had to fight differently than their enemies. They could not fight like the pagans. They could not participate in the same sort of behaviors. And so I guess what I'd say is, as we pursue this battle, we need to do so in a righteous way. So you asked me some of the things that I'm observing or that I'm seeing. I think the temptation for many of us is to be overly pragmatic. I think the temptation right now in largely more the sort of the right-wing movement within the church, this idea of wanting to fight the culture war, that's a godly inclination. That's a godly war. But I think there is a willingness to compromise on standards and be pragmatic to accomplish the goal, because we're so focused on the fact that it's wartime that we're pursuing immediatism in a sense of win at all costs now, and then we'll pick up the pieces and fix it later. That's a Catholic way of thinking. I'm going to go ahead and shoot and do whatever I want and then just do penance, right? We're not like that. We can't operate like that. So we have to fight the fight, but we can't just pursue pragmatism, win at all costs, and then damn the consequences. That's what I'm saying.
And I think the tendency then is when we've been awakened to a lot of the realities and truths around us, is that we want the reflex reaction is too easily one that is fleshly, right? Where we become like the people that we oppose in the way in which we fight them. And so our weapons are not carnal.
Right.
We don't fight in the same way. And so the way in which we fight needs to be virtuous, and that is really by faith, because then we're really trusting that God will use things that are on the surface appear to be weaker, but are actually empowered by Him in accomplishing His purposes. And so, what are we talking about? Things that are fleshly. Well, I would say one of them certainly is the use of language, vulgarity, crassness, and offense for the sake that is driven by a lot of anger and fear. Some are warning about issues of envy. I think some of that does need to be heeded as a legitimate warning, because I think some of those things are out there. Not that everyone is in that camp, but I do find that there is this this desire to lash back out and to try to make points with being as shocking and as vulgar as possible. I do believe in a serrated edge. I do believe in a poignant term that is not always rated G, right?
Sure.
Yet there is a time when it can be useful. The problem is that becomes apparently every time it is useful. It is all, and there is a gratification of the flesh in doing that, because you're thinking that you're being bold and you're fighting, but you're actually just being carnal.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of that right now where Christian men are fighting like unchristian men and giving themselves a pass as if they're fighting in a godly way.
Yeah, absolutely. And before people are listening and thinking we're going soft, just to address the potential accusations of Jesus juking or pearl clutching or pietism, listen to any of our other episodes, and you'll know that that is nothing that we condone. In fact, our last episode listed all three of those things as threats that we need to hate in the church. And so, hear this as pastors who love you and as brothers who are tempted in the same ways that you are, because we hate what we're seeing in the church. We're hating what we're seeing in the society, and we want it to end. I want child sacrifice to end. I want feminism and LGBT agenda to end. I want to see it ended so strongly in our nation, in our church. I've seen the evil that it's done. I mean, our nation is broken. There is so much death and destruction and decay. We hate it we hate it, right? Hear that. But we also recognize that hatred cannot produce bitter fruit. Our hatred ought to actually be a righteous hatred. It ought to produce fruit of the Spirit. It ought to produce a desire to fight in a glorious, righteous, and valorous way. And so if we fight this fight in such a way that is actually desecrating Christ's name, then we're actually doing a disservice to our witness. And so, again, how we fight matters. Some of you guys might not want to hear that, but how we fight matters. It really does.
And James 1, what you just said there brought up in my mind, James 1:20, for the anger of man does not achieve the righteousness of God. If you want to just reply or communicate your anger against the situation or against the people that you believe are the perpetrators of this issue, beware that it is a proper use of your passions. And that you are under control, right? Strength under control, right? We ought to be bridled by the Spirit. And so you mentioned even, I think, on our last episode, the fruits of the Spirit still have legitimacy in the area of men who fight. Yep. And so we recognize that there's different ways to fight, but there's still fruits there that the evidences and the impact of the Spirit of God in our hearts and in our lives does need to come through. And if what comes through is simply just fleshliness, which is demonstrated in anger and in attack, in a way that is ungodly and not virtuous, then I think that's a problem. And then furthermore, I think, as I mentioned, just this issue of fleshliness, as men are awakening to the issue of needing to reclaim masculine territory, masculine behaviors, it continues to show itself, I think, also in fleshly appetites that are very addictive and that are very just feeding a false view of masculinity,
sort of the manosphere temptations.
Yeah, just fleshliness, and I'll highlight it in the areas of alcohol, of tobacco, and of nicotine, all those types of things, and it's it's all those things that we would recognize that even virtuous and polite and dignified behaviors were always things that were kept under control, not things that were flaunted and were emphasized as if they were the things themselves that made you masculine, right? Yep. So again, I'm not one. I'll repeat it again. I'm not one that is against "thou shalt never smoke," "thou shalt never drink," "thou shalt never," do.
You're not a teetotaler.
No, I'm not a teetotaler. But the issue, the emphases on these things, that in order to really reclaim and recapture, then you need to do those things. That's not what it means to be a man. Now, doing those things might be fine, but that is not that is not what it means to reclaim and to fight like a Christian, right? Using vice or
potential vice, anyway.
Potential vice, but still, even the element of I need substances.
Yep.
I need substances to actually make sure that I am.
And for the ladies out here, I'm going to insert your latte. That also counts in this conversation, right?
Well, and
being coffee and Jesus is just as offensive.
Look, the issue of addiction, it doesn't matter what the issue is.
Right.
It doesn't matter what the issue is. If you're a slave to a substance, or a slave to a thing, then there is an issue of sin that needs to be dealt with. It doesn't matter what it is. But this issue of stimulants,
Yep.
this issue of uh, I think feeding the flesh and arguing that, well, we're just really increasing our masculinity. I think is baloney.
Yeah. So what I will say is this: there, as we talk about fighting against sort of the emasculation of men, there is a sense in which if you picture what 150 years ago looked like, I think in a lot of ways, some of this stuff we're talking about is sort of the dude version of like trad wife thing, right? And
Yes.
it's really what it is. It's one of those things where we look at men from 150 years ago. They're wearing suits. They're smoking their pipe. They're drinking their whiskey, and they're walking down the street confidently in a society that they helped build. That's not a bad thing to idealize. Like so there is a sense in which recapturing, hey, you know what? You told us that smoking a pipe is going to kill us and that we can't have a drink of alcohol because we're dirty sinners. Yet taking that back, sure, yeah, and amen. I mean, half the time when we're having a men's Bible study or book study, we're sitting around a fire pit, people are smoking cigars, we're drinking whiskey. Full disclosure, we're Reformed Baptists, not those other kind of Baptists, right, at my church. So that's fine. But you know what we're not? We're not getting drunk. We're not also going around telling each other that if you don't do that, not everyone participates. That's fine. We don't think that the men who aren't are somehow less masculine. And so the pursuit of those things ought to be in a godly fashion of enjoying the good gifts that God has given you.
That's right.
And here's a good C.S. Lewis quote for you. C.S. Lewis referred to smoking a pipe as having two benefits. One, it gives a wise man time to think when he puts a pipe in his mouth, and it gives the fool something to stick in his mouth so he shuts up. Right. So, so I can recognize that there is a sense in which some guys sitting around a fire pit enjoying a conversation, that there is a godly place for that. And there's nothing wrong with us enjoying those things as God intended them. But I would agree with you that there is like this hyper focus, it's almost like multi-level marketing for dudes.
Yeah.
Where it's like, hey, you got to buy this cigar or you got to buy this nicotine pouch. If you want to use those, yeah, no prohibition. That's fine. But when you become dependent upon that to feel like somehow you're participating in biblical masculinity, careful. And I, full disclosure, there's plenty of godly men who are influencers, quote unquote, in the Reformed world that I don't think are trying to peddle it in that way. But I think that's how it's being appropriated by some people.
There is a rebel attitude.
Exactly.
There is a rebellious attitude to that. To a lot of what's happening today. Again, if you want to have a glass of wine or a shot of whiskey, whatever you want to do, like I'm not that concerned about it at all by itself. Okay, but the thing itself doesn't bother me. It's the issue of this is how we fight. Yep. This is what it means to be a man. This is what I need.
Yeah, and I have to look this way.
I have to look this way. Yes, right? I have to look this. I got to look tough. I got to act. I got to act like a all that kind of stuff. As opposed to just an element of it's just a thing that I enjoy to do here and there, and it's like big deal. But it's become part of the fleshly way to fight. Is I'm going to spice up my language, and I'm going to flaunt in your face things that are sometimes even offensive, like smoke, those sort of things. I'm just going to flaunt all of these things because this is what it means to be a rebel man.
Yeah, and there's a conversation to be had about men's spaces and things like this that I do think is helpful in the sense that, like, genuinely, when typically if you think about a woman, you don't think of them as smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. Those do come across as masculine behaviors. And so when you see a woman doing that, that's offensive in a way that it wouldn't be, potentially offensive in a way that it wouldn't be if a man does it. Mm-hmm. But in the pursuit of those things, you're not, if your pursuit is the means itself rather than the ends, right? Then you have an issue. And that's really all we want to talk about today as we talk about how we fight. It's not that any of these things are in and of themselves sinful or wrong. It's just that when they become the test for you to know whether or not you're doing a good job rather than the outcome. At the end of the day, the test for your righteous behavior and conduct before God is the fruit that you produce. If the fruit that you're producing in your family is glorious and righteous as you pursue to apply the word of God to your life, then all these things that you're doing along the way are inconsequential.
That's
and
right.
praise God, enjoy them. But if you're looking at these things like, if I just check these boxes and I do these things, I'm going to feel more masculine, and therefore that's going to careful. You're not thinking it. No guy listening to this podcast is thinking, if I just do these things, I'll be manly and people will respect me. But you might actually be living as if you do believe that, whether you realize it or not. And that's what I'd caution on. It's not like I'm dreadfully concerned that there's a whole bunch of men that are buying into a trad man, whatever. That's not what I'm worried about. What I am concerned about is, how do I honor Christ with my behavior? You're not forbidden from enjoying some of these things, by all means. You're not forbidden. Mm-hmm. But when you make that part of your identity, that if you're not participating in this way, that you're somehow less, are you honoring Christ in the battle? And are you focusing on something that's really secondary? And for some of you guys...
Are you just pursuing your own fleshly pleasures?
Well, let's just be frank. Some of you guys don't have the bank account to be spending money on those things.
Okay, you beat me to it.
Let's just be honest here. You guys will complain about your wife using the credit card to buy stupid things on Amazon packages, but then you have a $200 liquor allowance. It's like, okay, maybe you should cut that out of your budget. Just saying. And that's one of the reasons why we enjoy stuff on the Lord's Day.
That's part of what I'm getting at, Gabe, right? This issue of, this is the way we fight, and it's an emphasis on my own pleasure and my own
it's
flesh,
just earthly means,
and it's earthly means. Earthly means, as opposed to the emphasis on the virtues that. Look, the emphasis in Scripture, right, is the way in which we speak to one another, and not under the control of substances, not under the control of any other thing than the Spirit of God. Yeah. And that's what I find is, I think that there is an emphasis to be more like the world. Look, what is it that the world wants to do when they party? It's feed the flesh.
Yep.
And what the Christians just they want to use vulgar language, and they want to feed the flesh. And when I'm raising my sons, and when they're out in the world, I want them to be separated from the world. Yep. I want them to be different. I want them to be. I want to shine as a light, not to be like, oh, I do all the stuff that you do. I just have Jesus with me. Like, no. We actually are different, and so there are things that we do to discipline our bodies, and that we are not just pursuing the fight in the same way that the other side would pursue their own pleasures.
Yeah. So redeem it, right? That's the message here. Is it's not saying that you need to be a teetotaler and be forbidden from all these things. But for me, like, I don't drink a lot of alcohol throughout the week, but I'll enjoy a glass of whiskey with the guys after church at our potluck every Sunday pretty frequently. You know what? Because it's part of enjoying the Lord's Day feasting and enjoying that time with the guys. That's good with the families that are all gathered and feasting together. We're good Baptists. We have a potluck every Sunday. So, but all that to say, like, redeem those things.
Are we not good Baptists?
But man. I don't know.
Throwing shade.
You don't have Baptist. I mean, your Truth Family Bible Church, not Truth Family Baptist Church. I'm offending people. No, I'm just kidding. Man. I love you guys. You guys don't.
Well, that's all the time we have for Truth today.
It's all the time we have for Bible.
It was nice having Gabe on the podcast.
I am forbidden from now on. No, I'm just kidding. I just like to throw that out there because people always assume that Baptists, and this ties into probably our next point, just assume that all we do is eat and we're fat. Well, a lot of us are. So that's unfortunately a caricature we need to fight. But no, redeem it. Like, enjoy them in a gentlemanly way. That's fine. Don't let it become your identity, though. Don't let it become what you are known for as your outward expression. And just to tie that in, since I brought up, I've been fond of saying this past week that we need to make Baptists fit again. We need to actually pursue self-control and disciplining our bodies. There are way too many fat pastors out there, frankly. And I need to lose some weight. And I'm working on trying to be healthy and be able to provide and protect for my family for years to come. That's a self-discipline thing. If we have, morbidly obese pastors in the pulpit, you can question their self-discipline. That's actually a valid thing. Again, though, an emphasis on physique, an emphasis on exercise, that also can be over-exemplified to the point where it's no better than some of the trad wives in their dresses. saying that this is peak femininity, and if you don't look
That's right.
like this aesthetic, you're somehow failing. That's actually a godly thing
I
to
don't submit to
pursue.
my husband, but I wear a dress.
Exactly.
Right.
It's like, yes, I love that the women of both of our churches. I mean, Good Friday, I had a good laugh because I counted, I think, 8 women, 2 of which were in my family, wearing the exact same dress. So like we're all about feminine, modest beauty, absolutely. But that's not what makes our wives.
We're about the greater things.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's just one expression. So again,
It's a good point.
I don't want this to be prohibitive. I just want to say that whatever you do it for God's glory, right? So whether you eat or you drink, whether you smoke or you don't smoke, whether you work out, okay, you have to work out at some level, right? But to what extent, right? All those things ought to bring God glory. And so as you pursue these tangible earthly expressions of faithfulness in your life, and also of enjoying God's good gifts, just make sure that you don't make the means the end all be all, right? That's all we're really trying to say, because that actually is happening, and here's, I'm just going to take a step back here for a second. What frustrates me about this, Danny, is that there are a lot of guys in the church that have critiqued young right-wing men, like have just school-marmed them and, just mocked them and said, you don't care about the gospel. And they've accused them of all these horrible things. And I have defended these young guys, and not all of them are young, but I've defended these guys, and I'm with them, and they're my brothers. And I would align myself in many ways, tribally speaking, with these guys. What I don't want to see happen is have some of the behavior that's coming out of the camp actually prove some of these, nags
That's
correct.
Right. That's right.
That's really what it comes down to, gentlemen. Is I don't want the school marms of the evangeli church having anything to complain about. Let our conduct be pure before them, so that we can joyfully laugh as we fight the good warfare before them.
We need to maximize our virtue and the actual fight, not the pretend fights that actually are just demonstrate sort of this fleshly approach. And I agree with that. And I think they another point that I just want to add to that as we begin to wrap things up is even though that we're going to have some disagreements with the way in which other people fight, I think it's also important for us to not get nitpicky and to be fighting our own.
Yeah.
When we disagree, even if they're not fighting well, we don't need to be, I think, fighting and separating from our own. And I was just Samson. He's in the Hall of Faith, so he's a great example. Interesting.
There is a time
Samson is actually on your mic stand there. I didn't realize this was a Samson mic stand.
What do you know?
But yeah, one of those things. And so
there is a time for an all-out ditch brawl.
Well, Samson was very uncouth, and he wasn't well liked because of the way in which he fought, and he fought in a way that made other people not like Israel, not like God's people, and so they wanted to turn him in, right? They wanted to tie him up, and they wanted to hand him over and say, Philistines, you can go ahead and have him. We're going to turn our own guy over to the enemy. Yep. Let's not do that, okay? let's not do that. Now we can talk to each other. This is an effort to encourage and to think through how call people to do things in the best way. But I'm not really that interested, and I appreciated Steve Dace at the conference in Texas, right? I'm really not that interested that he goes when we say, you know what, we need men to fight, and then men stand up and finally start to fight, and then people go, oh, well, but not like that.
Exactly.
Like I actually don't have, I'm really not interested in that. And I think there's something to that. I'm not going to be one that's going to be like, hey, let's just throw all these guys away and they've got nothing to contribute because they don't fight in the way I want them to fight. I want them to fight well, but let's not destroy each other or just fracture and separate ourselves. Like, look, I think what Doug Wilson and James White did to just actually anathematize these other guys that weren't fighting in the way that they thought they should be fought, I thought was ridiculous. And I think that and I don't want to throw away James White and Doug Wilson because I thought that they were ridiculous. I think that we need to have, similar to what we talked about last time, we need more unity, and sometimes we need to be unified with people we disagree with, even in the way in which they fight. And so I want to call people to fight well and to fight better and to be virtuous and be virtuous soldiers, not just grunts who are just kind of, sailors, kind of the old proverbial sailor, where it's like, yeah, he's
We
not.
need blue collar guys, but
But let's pursue the greatest good in the
Yeah.
way in which we do things. Let's actually fight and not be the pretend fighters that just are fleshly, but just but I it's important how we fight, but it's more important, I think, that we try to stick together, even with Christians who aren't fighting like the way that we think they ought to be fighting.
Yeah, we just need to not take ourselves so seriously. That's really all I'm getting at here. We kind of poke jabs
And
at
let's
some salty
remember who the
language.
enemy is.
Exactly. We poke some jabs at some of the online sort of influencer culture, but at the end of the day, like, those are our brothers. I'm not attacking them. I'm just saying, be humble enough and be honest with yourself enough to be like, okay, I'm being kind of silly. That's all I'm saying. Because if we don't, then we're going to get obsessed with sort of a facade rather than the actual substance. And I think most of the guys that encourage some of these behaviors that we talked about today, I think are genuine guys who are trying to fight the good fight, and they're not trying to produce a facade. They're trying to produce a foundation. So I want to be fair here, and so I really appreciate what you just brought up, because one of the probably the most disturbing things I've seen in the church recently is just the tendency to cast people outside the faith over non-gospel issues. Like, there is a tendency right now in the church. You mentioned some of the dust up with some of those older church fathers with Wilson and White. I mean, you think about some of the disagreements that have happened in the past year. Like, honestly, I just don't want to deal with the drama of it all, because at the end of the day, I look at these guys and I'm like, yeah, he's a brother. He's also a brother. Why are we fighting again? Again, these things matter. They're not unimportant. But when we are so quick to say, I don't know if you believe the gospel, and that's what I see some of these commentators.
I've seen some of that too.
I mean, even guys that I respect from like organizations like G3, I've seen some of those guys fighting the good fight. Some of these guys are even abolitionists. They, whatever, like godly men, generally speaking. I've seen some of their commentary on some of these things. He's a false teacher. He's a demon. I'm like, well, what is happening?
If you have wrong views about race, I don't think you can be a Christian then. What?
Yeah,
What
it's
are you
like,
talking about?
can we have some charity here?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, like,
so I
back
appreciate
up.
you bringing that up, because that's honestly the threat. When we talked about rightly ordered hates last time, one of the thoughts I had in my mind is that we tend to get distracted with infighting, and that all that does is open up the flank. It opens up the flank to be attacked from without the church. I mean, why do you think so many people are departing to things like Eastern Orthodox or the Catholic Church, which are still Christian adjacent, granted? We still believe in the Trinity. That's good. But if you think about the departure from the Protestant church, it's because of a lack of masculine leadership. It's a perception that there's stability and masculinity there. Tradition there. Well, guess what? Why did that happen? Because we were over here school-momming each other over stupid things and arguing and throwing stones at brothers. And all of a sudden they look appealing because even if they have a pope.
Part of that, but the Protestant church has been largely gay. So
it is.
That's the other part.
Yeah, okay. So it's getting late. Now we're saying all the things, but it's true. We have imbibed this just effeminate spirit within the church, and we've left our flank open. And this is what I think happens. If you go back to like the Reconstructionist movement, same thing. All these guys who are leaders in the movement start kind of fighting each other and nitpicking each other over things. And a lot of the momentum that was gained under that movement was lost. I think we're seeing a very similar thing in the Christian nationalist movement. The Reformation was the same way. The sectarian mindset. And guess what? That was Rome's concern about the Reformation, is that you become sectarian and that there would be infighting, there would be no unity. Well, let's not prove them right. Because at the end of the day, we have the creeds, we have our confessions, we have way more that unites us than separates us. And so if we disagree on methodology, where there is genuine sin, we need to all be willing to call each other out, right? You said how we fight matters, but we don't want to be the guys that say, not like that. 100%. But when we see genuine sin, if we see someone who is violating scripture and we say, hey, brother, okay, that's the key point. Hey, brother, I want you to be aware of this. That's a very different mentality than saying, hey, false teacher, right? And that's what I'm seeing happen is that we're not addressing each other as brothers. We're not being slow to speak. We're not trying to outdo one another and showing honor. We're not considering others more righteous than ourselves. We're not, I mean, there's so many scriptures that are being violated daily in online dialogue and in just the broader church context that we just need to heed better. Treat one another as brothers. Assume the best of our brothers who may have opposing views about methodology. Because guess what? We might have a Samson in our midst, and we might think he's being way too radical. And you know what? Maybe I need him to challenge me because I'm being way too lackadaisical. And on the other side, we may have the Paul Washers of the world that might be seemingly a little pietistic, but you know what? We need him too. I need him to remind me to keep things about the main thing sometimes. And you know what? Some people might fault him for that, but we need that too. We need guys all across this battlefield fighting the good fight. And so be slow to hurl stones and sticks at each other, and take our words today as just a word of caution from brothers who want to fight alongside you. We're not throwing sticks at you. We want to fight next to you, and to say, hey, just be honest with yourself, be humble, be able to laugh at yourself. Are you being a little too obsessed with, recording yourself doing weights? Maybe just a little bit, while you smile in the
I didn't
camera.
think that's where you were going, but okay.
That's the first thing that popped in my head. I don't know. I just see guys like posting like, check out my max, and it's like, all right, like commendable. I wish I was there again, but it's kind of weird that you feel the need to like show me. I don't know. Maybe I'm being nitpicky.
Well, let's make sure that as we seek to be fighting and building and promoting that which is good and true and beautiful, as we fight the enemies of Christ, as we are seeking to be faithful to Him, let's pursue it without emphasizing our own fleshliness, but instead virtuously, valiantly, honorably pursuing these things that Christ might be honored. And that's all the time that we have for Truth today. We want to thank you for joining us. And until next time, we hope that you will grow in your love and commitment to Christ and His church. As we are sanctified in the truth, God's word is truth.